Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I'm super excited to have a literary agent on the podcast with me today, Jessica Felleman. She is going to answer all my query questions, give us some insight into being a literary agent, and she gives us some really good questions that authors should be asking literary agents on the call. She is with Jennifer Lyons Literary Agency, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy that interview. Before we get to know Jessica, I want to tell you about my favorite book of the episode. It is Sing Me Forgotten by another Jessica, Jessica S. Olsen. It is such a good book. It comes out on March 9th of this year by Inkyard Press and is a gender-swapped Phantom of the Opera type of book, which is so cool, right? It was a really great read, has some really good magic, and she has packed so much into this book. So much happens, and you're almost like, wow, how did you do that? I really enjoyed reading it, and I think you guys will too. So let me go ahead and read you the blurb. Isda does not exist, at least not beyond the opulent walls of the opera house. Cast into a well at birth for being one of the magical few who can manipulate memories when people sing, she was saved by Cyril. I think I'm saying that right. The opera house's owner. Since that day, he has given her sanctuary from the murderous world outside. All he asks in return is that she use her power to keep ticket sales high and that she stay out of sight. For if anyone discovers she survived, Isda and Cyril would pay for their lives. But Isda breaks Cyril's cardinal rule when she meets Emmerich Roden, a charming boy who throws her quiet, solitary life out of balance. His voice is unlike any other she's heard, but the real shock comes when she finds in his memories hints of a way to finally break free of her gilded prison. Haunted by this possibility, Isda spends more and more time with Emmerich, searching for answers in his music and his past, but the price of freedom is steeper than Isda could ever know. For even as she struggles with her growing feelings for Emmerich, she learns that in order to take charge of her own destiny, she must become the monster the world tried to drown in the first place. It's so, so good. You guys are going to love it. So make sure you add Sing Me Forgotten by Jessica S. Olsen to your list. Pre-order it right now. And while you're doing that, let's go ahead and get to know literary agent Jessica Felleman. Let's go ahead and get going. Jessica, can you tell me what drew you to publishing and becoming a literary agent?
Yeah, I actually, I'm a writer first, and so I was getting my MFA out at the California Institute of Arts, or CalArts, out in California, and while working on the literary magazine there, started taking on sort of office duties, and realized that I enjoyed sort of the business side of helping the literary magazine as much as the editorial side and working with authors. And my mentors noticed that as well and put me in touch with an agent who I started working for remotely. And after a year or so, I just sort of fell in love with this idea that there is a job that is required, that authors need help on the business side, because no matter how lovely the author, how brilliant a writer, they're not as good at the business things, and they shouldn't have to be.
Right.
They really shouldn't have to be. And so I love doing that. And it's, yeah.
That's awesome. I do think you're right. You know, while there are, I feel like, authors who self-pub and are really good at the business side too, it is so much work. All the indie authors who I've talked to are like, it's like a full-time job to be marketing yourself, doing all that stuff. So the people who that isn't reasonable for them to manage, yeah, partnering with a literary agent is very good because you guys are good at what you do.
Yeah, and the authors who do self-pub, and I have a couple authors who do that as well as work with me on some of their other works. It's a crazy amount of work, and I have so much admiration for them for doing that.
Yeah, I have a friend who just self-pubbed her book, and she did great marketing, good, but really good at getting it out there and having people promote it for her too. But I was like, I don't have the time for that at all. Well, part of what I love about these literary agent interviews and what my listeners love is getting to know you as an agent, people who are interested in you. Hearing your voice is such a different way to get to know you, but also hearing your feedback on different parts about querying. So I do have some query questions for you. I'd love to know what some of the best queries you've read have had in common.
Ooh, best queries. Okay, so I think that the easiest way to describe it is that they have the clear, like a really strong and clear short hook that quickly gets across both the tone, but also the story and the stakes of the story, if it's fiction.
Right.
Sort of the same thing for nonfiction. Being able to sort of summarize your pitch well is it's a difficult thing to do, but if you can do it well, it makes it a really strong query. And along with that, I would say knowing your comp titles well also really stands out to me. It just shows that the author has been reading other work like theirs that's out there.
Yeah.
And they understand what the market looks like, and they understand, the other authors out there they're about to join. So
I think those are great things. I think, writing a query is such a different type of writing than writing a whole book. So, I'm one who's terrible at it, but there are other writers out there who are so great, and I always enlist their help for those sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, that is the whole point of a query, right? Is to have a condensed short hook that grabs your attention. It's like the copy, on the jacket, the jacket copy.
Right. I love good jacket copy. It's one of my favorite things to read, a really good jacket copy. It's very satisfying.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with a query letter, and it is very hard. It's very different from what your book may actually look like. And I think that's one thing I see in queries that maybe need a little work, is that it sounds too much like the way they write if it's fiction. And it's, it's definitely a take as many steps back as you can.
Yeah, give yourself some space from it. And I think that's the hardest part as an author. I mean, you have the whole story in your head. You've been stuck in it for however many years. It can be really hard to take those steps back to be okay, what do I actually need to include in here?
Yeah, I definitely recommend bouncing your query, even off a friend who doesn't work in the industry or write, just to sort of hand it to someone and be hey, read this. Do you and tell me what you think?
Yeah.
Friends and family can be so valuable that way.
They can be, but make sure it's a friend who's going to be honest with you, not one who's just going to be it's amazing, you're so talented. We love those friends too, but at different stages in the writing process.
Times, yes.
Well, my next question, how important do you think voice is in a synopsis?
Voice. Oh, so I think I don't want to say it's that important. I think it's important in that you don't want your synopsis to be boring or dry, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that a good voice in a synopsis can get across a good tone of what the tone of your work is. Is it funny? Is it emotional? Is it dramatic? But you don't want the voice to overshadow the point of the synopsis, getting across what's happening in the plot, what are the characters' journeys, what is this book really about. And voice for me sort of falls secondary. It's sort of the support for everything else.
That's good to know, though. I mean, I think writing a synopsis is hard enough at a certain point. If you're struggling with it, get it down, and then don't try to be too gimmicky, making it exactly in the voice of your novel. I think it's important.
Right. Yeah, it definitely does not have to read the same way your novel reads. You've already written a novel, if it's fiction, or if you finished your proposal, and that's hard. That you don't need to do it again.
Yeah.
No. For sure.
And in an even more condensed version. Give yourself a break there. What are your thoughts on having authors hire a proofreader or an editor before querying for their manuscript?
For querying agents. So I actually know a number of fellow cohorts and writers who proofread and edit on the side of their writing themselves. And an extra set of eyes like that, especially a professional set of eyes, can really be helpful. But I don't think it's necessary. It really depends on sort of what you've done up to that point. So if you have gotten your MFA, if you've attended, some conferences, if several people have read your novel and given you feedback, and you have done all that work and you're ready to query, I think, like, sort of with the synopsis or the query letter, it's good to have someone who's willing to take a look at it for errors at that stage. But I think that if you don't have those built-in communities, turning to a professional proofreader or editor could be really, really helpful, for sure.
I think that it definitely could be helpful if you don't have any critique partners or beta readers, or maybe like it's your very first draft, you've never written a book before. Like maybe you need a little bit of guidance,
don't
right?
Query agents yet in that case.
I think we've all made that mistake too at some point in our career. But I think the part that can hold people back from that, of course, is the cost too, right? Like those people deserve to be paid well, but sometimes it can be expensive. And so, I think at that point, if that's not an option for you, our writing community is so amazing, especially now. I feel like since we can't really see each other in person, or conferences can't be in person as much, like there's no problem of you finding somebody maybe who's across the world or across your country, like to help you out and read something for you. I think people are very generous with their time.
Yeah, and writing groups they're so key. For sure. You want to have a community to help you improve your work. In exchange, you get to help others improve their work.
Yeah. And
then you get to celebrate together when anyone has a win, which is extra awesome.
Yeah, that's the best. I mean, we love wins. My next question, I'd love to know what a big misconception is that people have about what you do as a literary agent.
This is a good one. I think this first answer is not really my answer. The first misconception is something that a lot of my family members still get wrong, is that I am not an editor at a publishing house. I do not publish.
There you go. Yeah.
Which I think just says something about how opaque the industry still is to people who aren't working in it. It's like very complicated.
It is.
But aside from that very humorous mix-up that happens a lot, I think the hardest thing to sort of manage, for me at least, is the idea that I am always working, that I'm always available to somebody who may have an idea for a book or have just started writing, and that my time is available to them. I love to help people. It's why I do what I do. But I've had to learn to say no and say, like, actually, you're not ready to talk to me yet, just because you need to go talk to other writers. You need to go read some other books. You need to do some other prep work before I can offer up my time.
Yeah.
And I think that some people take that well and understand, and some people don't. And I get both sides.
I think that is definitely a misconception. I think, as we enter the querying process, or as people sign with literary agents, it can definitely be like an expectation, like, oh, okay, I sent it, they're going to get back to me right away, right? Or the one I've heard from other agents too is that you guys are always reading, which kind of makes sense. Like, you're always working, you're always reading, always doing something. So like things should be coming back really fast. But yeah, I mean, you're still people, and you have lots of other things to do, and you don't have to work 24/7.
Thank you. I'm going to try to remember you saying that to me, because I need to tell it to myself a lot.
Especially now, as we like work from home too. If you work from home, it can be so easy to just like always hop on or always work, when, before, if you went into an office, it was like very clear, okay, working time, non-working time.
Yeah, my work screen is a swipe away from my like quote unquote home screen.
Yeah.
And I find myself there on the weekends, and I'm like, I don't even know how I've gotten there.
It's just muscle memory. Yeah, you just go. Well, on this same sort of vein, what's the hardest part of your job?
Oh gosh. I think the hardest part, and it's something that I'm still learning to manage, is fielding rejections for my authors when we're on submission. It's gotten a little easier over the last 5-6 years, but at the same time, because I love all the work that my authors are doing, every time a rejection comes in, it hurts a little. Yeah. And so I have to like field that hurt for them, and then take a step back and be like, okay, wait a minute, is there good advice within this rejection that I need to be passing on? And it's always hard to to hear a pass.
Oh, for sure. But I think it's good, maybe for people to recognize that you deal with rejection too as a literary agent. You obviously have to say no to people a lot as they query you, but you still have to have no said to you and your authors all the time as well. So, it doesn't just end with you. There's rejection in each step of the publishing process.
Every step of the publishing process, there are people's ideas are being rejected.
Yes.
It sounds worse than it is, I think.
What is it?
I don't know. I'm just picturing like towers of offices in Manhattan, just like saying no, 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 no. And there's definitely a lot of no's because, just like the querying process, the submission process to editors is about, well, for fiction and for nonfiction as well, but more so for fiction, it's about taste. It's about finding someone who really likes this work as much as I like the work.
Right.
And it's, it's hard and it's not a sure thing.
Yeah, I know. And I think that can be a misconception about the publishing process for authors. Like, I feel like there's at times people who are like, okay, I'm going to get a literary agent. And then it's like, I've made it. I've peaked. We're good. It's all uphill from there. But there are so many authors who I've talked to who are like, yeah, I signed with my agent. We went on sub, book didn't sell. And it's like, oh, okay, that can happen. Yeah, it's not like you sign with your agent and you're good.
I definitely celebrate the win.
Right.
But also like save your energy, because oftentimes as soon as I've signed an author, it's like, okay, the work starts now.
Yep. Gotta go into revision mode.
Revision mode and submission mode, and sometimes that it won't happen. It won't sell, and we have to handle that and decide what's next.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'll flip this question. What's your favorite thing about being a literary agent?
Ooh, favorite thing. Aside from that moment that you do have an offer and you get to call an author and say, guess what? Someone wants to pay you money to make your book real, which there's just nothing better than that, I don't think.
No.
I also really enjoy the editorial process. I think because I was a writer first and I was in a strong writing community before I moved into agenting, sort of beginning when an author is beginning a book or beginning a proposal and we're on the phone talking about the ideas and the plot and what to research and what to read. I love that process and I love the conversations that come out of that process. It's just really fun for me, that part.
That's very fun. And you get to be, a crucial part of that process, and you kind of get to see this idea kind of bloom into life, right? I can see how that would be very cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I've also had authors teach me stuff because I do fiction and nonfiction. Sometimes I'm talking to someone who's an expert in their field, and we've been on the phone for an hour and a half because I've just learned so much. And I'm like, well, this is amazing.
That is the best. Because we always love to be learning. I love to learn, all new things. And so it's good to and sometimes it's about something random, and that's kind of the best.
Yeah, I think that's a link. People who love to read also love to learn.
Yes, I think that's very true. My next question is, about the relationship between author and agent. There's so much that goes into it, and I think that, like we were talking about before, authors sometimes can feel like signing with an agent is like, okay, I've made it, and yes, celebrate the win, but you want to make sure that you're really signing with somebody who is going to be a good match for you, who you guys are going to work well together, and not just say yes to the first person who signs you if you don't get that good feeling from them. So what, in your opinion, as an agent, what questions should authors be asking an agent on the call?
On the call. So when an agent has said, I want to read more, I want to talk to you about representation. I think that I feel like a lot of my answers are sort of dictated towards the fiction projects. But I think that something that's very important is to ask the agent what their process is with authors. So how hands-on are they? Are they going to be, providing you deadlines, checkpoints? How deep of an editorial process do they participate in? Because some agents really, really are hands-on and do a lot more pre-submission than others.
Yeah.
And some authors like that, and some don't. And I think you need to find someone who has a process that you think will work for you, for sure. And then also definitely, try to get a clear idea of what their vision for the book is. If we're talking about, first signing with an agent, you're probably submitting just one book to them, and sort of asking them, what comps they see to the book, what, kind of vision. I keep saying vision. This is a thing editors do a lot as well. Vision for the book.
It makes sense. I get it.
But yeah. You wanna make sure that listening to them talk about that idea gels with you,
right?
Because you never want there to be anything forced. And I think there's also this idea of like you get an agent, you've made it, that you can't go back on that, and sometimes you can't. And if you I always say to authors that, like, I want the relationship to work for both of us. If one of us isn't feeling like the communication is good or something's not going well, like, let's hit pause, let's figure out what's going on. Maybe I'm not the right agent for this project.
Right.
It doesn't mean I don't love it. It doesn't mean I don't want to support you. I'm going to be the first to click pre-order as soon as that link is available. But, if I am not creating a plan that works for the author, then that doesn't work for the author.
Yeah, I think that is something, authors know their book the best, right? And they're asking somebody to love their book as much as they do. But you don't want to say yes to someone who's like, oh, okay, but I want to do this and this and this and this with the book, and that isn't what the author thinks. Like, obviously be open to feedback, because sometimes there could be something that really will be better. But if it's like total 180 with your book and maybe that's just like not what you're going to do, then you have to, make that hard decision, even though getting an agent is so hard, and getting to that point where you're on the call is like such a long journey.
Yeah, it's a long journey. And honestly, it's the same thing when it comes to choosing an editor too, right? You also need to save your energy for that step.
Yeah.
It's another thing I say to my authors a lot. Like, I am a very hands-on agent because I like the editorial process. You are going to probably see some heavy edits for me. I'm going to ask some big questions, and I have authors who are not afraid to push back and like say, no, that's not what I want, and explain why. And I'll think about it and go, oh, you know what? You're totally right. Like, let's leave that and move on to something else, because I want them to retain editorial energy for their actual editor as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just think it's an important conversation for authors to have with themselves, to hear different feedback, because, you want to do as best as you can to make sure that relationship is going to work, and be honest with yourself as you talk to the agent, right? Like, listen to what they're saying and be truthful, like, okay, is that going to work for me, or is that not going to work for me?
Yeah, and I think on the call, it's totally okay for you to, like, say, like, oh, interesting, and not, like, agree right away. Like, you can take your time and think about it. This isn't something, no one should be pressuring you to make a decision.
Yes.
too quickly.
It is a big decision. So, yeah, give yourself a little bit of time. Don't take forever, but a little bit of time. Sleep on it. Well, my next question, I'd love to know what you're most excited about representing next. What are you, like, really hoping to see in your query inbox?
Ooh, this is so hard. I have a really broad range of interests. And I go through waves where, like, I'm craving fiction, I'm craving nonfiction. I'm definitely in a little bit more of a nonfiction craving moment right now, which is kind of strange. So on that front, I would really love to be seeing science writers or nonfiction writers exploring something about science or the brain, obsessed with the brain, and just sort of the way people function in general. And I'm always on the lookout for mythology and fairy tale retellings.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite books last year, that was not my book, was called Sharks in the Time of Saviors. And it's a modern sort of mythology influenced storyline, and I just was, like, blown away, and I would love more of that.
That's awesome. Well, I hope that the people listening have something for you just like that.
Me too. Send it over.
Sending it your way. I do want to ask you one off-the-cuff question, and it is hard, so I apologize, but take your time.
Okay.
I'd love to know, what's a book you've read recently that you really loved, like the one you can't stop raving to people about?
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, now I can't say Sharks in the Time of Saviors because I just said it.
I know.
Though it did make me cry at the end, which has not happened in a long time.
I'm writing it down.
And I'm very embarrassed that I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. You know what? I really enjoyed Lindsay Ellis's Axiom's End. It came out, I want to say, like this summer. I read it all in one day.
Ooh, that's always good.
And as I was reading it, I kept saying, like, I never read alien books. But I have definitely read some alien books, and I just liked the way she handled this one. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and off the top of your head.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today and letting me pick your brain about being a literary agent and helping me and my listeners get to know you a little bit more.
You're very welcome. It's been great chatting. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for joining me for this podcast episode. Make sure that you go and give Jessica Felleman some love. Send her your queries if you have what she's looking for. And make sure you're subscribed to this podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Give me a rate or a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be so greatly appreciated. And I will see you guys next time.